quorum. Let's call the meeting to order and we get started. Representative Blackman, could you lead us in a word of prayer, please?
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to come together today. Please keep us focused and humble in these proceedings and ever mindful of the needs of others, and that your will is always done. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. All right, this is the first meeting we've had because the study committees basically do not have to meet crossover day. So let's start off with everybody kind of introducing themselves so we'll know who the committee members here are. Let's see, number 2 down there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott Turner from House District 21.
Dominic LaRicchia from District 169, Coffee County, Bacon County, and Jeff Davis County.
Okay.
Jonathan Wallace, District 119, Athens, Clark County, and Oconee County.
Michael Smith, District 41, Marietta.
Brian Prince, District 127, Augusta, Georgia.
And that was
I'm Doreen Carter. I'm the state representative for House District 92. I have DeKalb and Rockdale counties.
Shaw Blackman, District 146, Houston County.
I'm Susan Holmes from Monticello, Georgia, and I have District 129, Jasper Jones, Monroe, and Butts.
all right. Now we get into those folks that have a lot of counties. I represent Crisp, Pulaski, Wilcox, and Houston counties.
Tom Kirby, District 114, Walton, Barrow, Gwinnett, and Rockdale counties.
All right, so we'll get started. What we're going to do today is listen to some of these requests for study committees and resolutions and hear what they're about. We have a large number, so we're going to try to cover 6 today, and then we'll cover them at other meetings over the next few days and find out. We'll have to come back then and make some decisions. But first of all, we do want to hear. So first on my agenda today is House Resolution 1039, and that. Representative Belton, you said you might need to wait until later. You're good now. Okay, thank you.
Can I give this out to each member? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a crisis in Georgia that no one's talking about. It's not about water. It's not about traffic or rural broadband. Those things can be fixed fairly easy with not money. It's the growing number of children and the shrinking number of teachers. Believe it or not, our children are growing by a factor of 25% over the last couple of years, and our teacher population is shrinking by about 11% in the last couple of years. It's hard to believe there are 2.5 million children in Georgia. 1 in 4 Georgians is under the age of 21, is either being educated or yet to be educated. In fact, Georgia has the 5th largest population of children in America, which leads to a very weird paradox. Georgia ranks among the very best in the nation in the percent of our budget that goes to education, but we rank one of the worst in the nation, 41st, in per child spending. These numbers are even more alarming when you learn about our supply of teachers is shrinking. Again, we lost 2,500 teachers 2,500 positions last year were not filled because we didn't have enough teachers. And teacher enrollment at the university system is down by 20%, even as we're shrinking the teacher population by 11%. Worse, 54% of our teachers today tell their students not to go into teaching. So the majority of teachers are telling their students don't teach. We lost 7,000 teachers in the last few years. All while, again, our escalating number of children, again, rising by about 25%. And as the governor so ably points out, 70% of the people in jail were high school dropouts. So this is a public safety issue. It's also a business issue. Not infrastructure, not water, not energy, but workforce development is the number one issue that's affecting job creation. It's a military issue. I put a letter in your, did you just hand it up to Keith? That letter is a letter from the Pentagon, signed by the Secretary of the Air Force, Secretary of the Navy, Secretary of the Army, to state legislators saying that they have two issues that they want state legislators to address: quality education and licensures. Representative Al Williams has done a great job doing the licensures. I think we're really all square on that, really as much as we can be. So the other issue we need to address is education. Generals, admirals, master chiefs, gunny sergeants are begging us to improve our schools. If you look around the world, you'll see that America is ranked among the 38th among our peers in math and science, 38th. We used to be ranked number 1. If that doesn't frighten you, I don't know what will. If you look at those countries, you'll find a very interesting things. They don't put their efforts or their focus or their money in quality tests. They put them on quality teachers. And the fact is, Georgia does not have enough teachers. And with the teachers we have are leaving. And then with most of those teachers we have now are part of the baby boom, and they're retiring. So what do? I'm not suggesting that we just throw money at the problem. We probably need to add some money. But what I'm trying to do is a way to dignify the profession, to acknowledge a simple truth that you and I knew when you grew up, that teachers are important. The teaching is a noble profession, and they need to be empowered to improve the children's education. As more and more parents do not parent, and standards and expectations continue to rise, and more behavioral issues that used to be handled by the family are now being handled by teachers. Never before has civilization asked so much of our teachers. So what I'm asking for is a resolution for a study committee to see how we can improve the profession, increase retention, recruitment, identify super teachers who can mentor other teachers, create leadership roles where the talents can be recognized and rewarded, shared among teachers who are struggling, and study possibly year-long internships at the university system, more hands-on experience before they get into the teaching profession. Improve teacher pipeline induction programs, service cancelable loans, improve school climate. Believe it or not, we found in climate, all that means is morale, basically the morale of the teachers. When the morale of the teachers is high, then the scores increase by as much as 25%. So the scores of our children are very, very tied to the morale of the teachers. Discipline, technology, class size, these kind of things I want to study with the study committee. I'm asking for a 5-member committee, would go down 5 different meetings to create a survey to see what we can do to improve the teaching profession, and also we mostly would be listening to teachers. And if you, I'll stand for questions, but I know there are a few people who would like to speak to this issue, sir.
Let's let our committee members ask questions first, and number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Belton. You started off in your presentation, you said initially that kids today are being told don't teach. Why do you think that is?
Because it's a very simple answer, and this is not politically correct, but for better or worse, teaching used to be fairly, there weren't a lot of, I'm gonna get myself in trouble here. Teaching has been more and more looked at as a business model, and that's a great thing. We all love business, but we're not making widgets, we're making children. And so more and more, we're asking teachers to produce a product, and we want this product to be all the same. Just for example, I fly airplanes, and I fly the airplane here to there. It's the same thing every time. Children are different, and because of that, teaching has to be more eclectic than that. And in general, there's more and more things being asked of teachers. There's less empowerment of the classroom because of discipline and because of society. More and more families are not raising their children, they're asking the schools to raise their children. So because of all these different things, it's amazing when the public education first started, there's 2 things they were required to do. It was teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, and something else. Now that list is about 100 things long. We're asking more and more and more and more things of teachers. And so there's a lot of reasons, but in my opinion, if we were to empower the teachers and make them feel more like they were a honored profession as opposed to just something that we're always blaming. Typically when something bad happens in the school, we blame the teachers. That's just a fact. And I tell you that one last thing I didn't speak about, if I say this, Mr. Chairman, but the last horrible shooting at Parkland, Florida, one of the young men, there was a coach who gave his life to protect this young man. And the young man said, you know, I always knew he was he was a hero, but I never realized that before, but he was always a hero to me. I mean, he did this heroic thing, but this man was always a hero to me, and I just didn't know that, and it took this thing to happen. I just think we need to be acting like our teachers are heroes again, as opposed to people who didn't who didn't raise their children right, and that's why we're blaming them.
That's a noble cause, I think. And my question would be, what law would we create that would restore that level of dignity?
We cannot create a law that's going to do that. You're exactly right. But what we can do is set up, figure out what the teachers need, figure out what they want. There are ways to empower teachers to make them feel like, and to create a culture change that we care about our teachers. And you say, well, that's hard to do. Well, if you don't ever start, you'll never get done. These other countries like Finland, Singapore, Japan, being a teacher is a big deal. It's an honor profession, and we need to march down that road.
Thank you.
Number 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Belton, I applaud you for wanting to sort of recognize and sort of get to do a study on this, because I concur with you that teachers are the first line of defense, and sometimes they spend more time with the children than the parents do. But my question is, with the the different teachers associations and educators associations, and I know this is not a new issue across, and not just in Georgia, but across the nation. Do we not think there may be some studies already out there that we could probably take and glean some of the things from to do that? And then if the answer is yes, do you think 5 meetings is enough to come up with something that's probably not already out there?
Well, that's a great question, Representative Prince. And there are studies, actually. Most of the things I mentioned in that long list of things I mentioned are from a PAGE study, and I think they want to talk about as well. But and maybe 5 is not enough. But if we start with 5, and if we add more, we can add some more. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Number 12.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess following up on what Representative Turner asked, we do a study committee, and we normally end up with coming up with some legislation. And I'm having a hard time picturing what the legislation would look like. This is a very noble and I see the idea and what you're trying to do, but I don't see how we're going to affect a change from what we learn.
Well, there are things we can do. For example, year-long internships. That's something we're not doing. For example, we could legislate year-long internships. We could legislate more.
When you say legislate, you're saying now we're going to tell the local schools?
We could, or the university system. That we want I'm not saying this is a solution. I'm saying that this is other countries do this. We could also legislate possibly. A lot of teachers complain about the fact that they don't have enough preparation time, and that many times their preparation time is taken over by other events. Well, we could legislate that, by golly, the teacher's got 1 hour a day, for preparation or whatever, to prepare their class studies. We could also legislate mentorships. Right now, the way it works is a teacher becomes a great teacher, and then he or she becomes an assistant principal, and now he's not teaching anymore. So there's no step in between assistant principal and teacher. We need mentors. We need super teachers who are helping these other teachers. And we could also possibly, have an incentive for these super teachers, these mentors for these other teachers. Because what happens, again, is each teacher makes this personal decision, do we want to keep teaching or not? And because my daughter's a teacher, for example, and she has very poor mentors. The assistant principals just didn't do anything for her. And if there was some better in between the assistant principal and the teacher, that might be something that we could do. That would be again, if we don't look at the process or we don't look at the problem, then we never fix the problem. And I realize this is a pie in the sky kind of thing, but it's either this or pour more money into it. Who wants to do that? Who wants to put more? And maybe we need some more money, but we've got to improve our education. We just got to do that. Georgia is doing much better. Actually, we've improved our education quite a bit. We've actually raised I think the graduation rate is raised by about 17 points in the last couple of years, about 22% increase. Our SAT and ACT are now pretty much at the national level. Remember a couple of years ago, the SAT was 49th in the nation. Well, it's now right there at the midpoint. So we're doing a lot of good things, but we need to continue that process.
Number 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to say, I think if we do end up studying this, we need to look at solutions, and this is something we can legislate, and that's like digital classrooms of the future. And I think that those models seem to be getting good effects because, kids are used to electronic content now, and there's a lot of content of curriculum that can be delivered electronically and put those teachers more in a coaching and counseling role, which is really what a lot of these kids need, where they're not being parented at home in a lot of cases, and there's not, parents want the teachers to raise these kids. And so if you're looking at this model, I would encourage you to look at a digital classroom model, and that is something we could legislate to improve what's going on, meet kids where they're at. You can move them at their own pace. You're not trying to keep it the same for all, but it actually assesses and moves them along as they master one area of content. They can move at their own pace, and it's really scalable, and it's really a innovative solution that I think we should be looking at. And so I would encourage you to do that if you do end up getting the study committee through.
I certainly will, Representative Ranks. That's a very good suggestion. Thank you.
Number 7.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Belton, I appreciate what you're trying to do. I support what you're trying to do. This is a growing problem in our state, and to the rest of my committee members, we're charged with solving our state's problems. Right. So if we can do anything to fix that and move us in the right direction and get some of our school students, proper teachers or some superstar teachers, then we're doing our job. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you for your kind words. Thank you, sir.
All right, I believe that's all the questions from. Oh, okay. All right, Nat's blinking. Okay. Go ahead, Representative Carter.
Well, Representative, I want to say thank you. I think studying this is something that we need, but I would like to ask if this gets approved to include parents at the table and some of the students, because as a parent, every time I hear someone say they're not parenting, I cringe, because each child is different. And to your point, we're not teaching machines, we're teaching humans. And so we have to have that human element. But I think until you bring the parents to the table, the teachers, the administrators, and the students all at the table, we're going to keep assuming what the problem is. So I hope that we will be able to pass this, and I look forward to the results.
Thank you, Representative Carter. You're exactly right. I failed to mention that. My school, I'm a school board member, 8 years. We had surveys done of kids, believe it or not, as young as second grade, And we found out that we had some problems at our primary school because of what the children said, and the parents as well. And we made those corrections and have a lot better results. So I completely agree.
All right, thank you, Representative. And you did say you had some people. Did we have a sign-up sheet out? No, I'm sorry, we didn't. Go ahead. If you will, just come to the mic and give us your name and why you're here.
Good afternoon. I'm Margaret Ciccarelli with the Professional Association of Georgia Educators, representing about 94,000 educators statewide, everybody from paraprofessionals to classroom teachers, principals, school superintendents, but the bulk of our members are classroom teachers. We come today to strongly support Representative Belton's plan. We appreciate him bringing that and appreciate the supportive comments of those on the committee. As Representative Belton said, and I don't want to go into the doom and gloom portion of it, but we are leaking teachers at all points in the pipeline in Georgia. We are not attracting enough of our students into the profession. We are not completing enough students in our teacher preparation programs and in our colleges of education. Those who graduate are not going on, enough of them are not going on to teach in Georgia classrooms, and they are not staying long enough in Georgia classrooms. This at a time when our student population is growing, which is something that's really fortunate in our high growth state. So there are some things that can be done that we hope the study committee would review. Things like strengthening Georgia's teacher mentor programs, things like adding extra weight in the funding formula for our teaching as a profession career and technical pathway. We have two education pathways in Georgia right now. One is geared toward early education students in high school who are trying to be trained for early childhood education, and then ones who are being trained for K-12, teaching as a profession. The early childhood pathway currently draws more funding weight in Georgia than the teaching as a profession pathway, which means that local districts have a financial incentive to offer that early childhood pathway instead of the teaching as a profession pathway. We'd at least like to see those two very important pathways on equal footing. And as Representative Belton mentioned also, common planning time is also of importance to teachers in Georgia. The recommendations that he distributed to y'all, many of them actually came from the Governor's Education Reform Commission. That group that was appointed by the governor did a fantastic job several years ago in coming up with recommendations to strengthen the teaching profession, but many of those were not ultimately moved on. And I think that would be a great place for the study to start, and as well as bringing in other pieces like that digital learning piece that was just referred to, and some of the other pieces that have been discussed today. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, I see one question.
Thank you.
Two. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. You just mentioned the Governor's Education Reform Commission and that there weren't measures that were implemented. What are some of the things that you think that were suggestions that came out of that commission that we should be doing that we didn't?
The planning time one was really one that was, and the mentoring one also. Those are two pieces that came out of that. And there was even a spinoff group that the governor put together with Representative Amy Carter when she was under the Gold Dome, as you probably know. And they did a great job traveling the state with the Teacher Advisory Committee and coming up with a list of recommendations, many of them having to do with planning time and mentoring, some of them having to do with teacher pay, but some of them were more cost neutral and had to do with strengthening our mentoring programs to make sure that we don't lose teachers in the first 5 years on the job.
Okay. You have a follow-up?
So the point of a study committee is much like what we had of the commission, is to make recommendations for, if we have a set of recommendations, those things that you just mentioned help us. Let me see if I can get to my notes where Representative Belton said, help dignify the profession or help build morale and school climate. You think that those things would help?
I do think they would help from our internal surveys, which Representative Belton mentioned. We have fluctuating levels of teacher satisfaction in Georgia when we do our annual survey. And we find when we pass kind of pro-educator, pro-student legislation, because they definitely feel that they're in a symbiotic relationship with their students, those two things usually go hand in hand. Our educator happiness level goes up, and I think that we could accomplish some of that this year.
Chairman, thank you. So my concern then would be, if we've already got a set of recommendations out of a committee that's done extensive work by traveling the state, why would we want to repeat that? Why don't we just go after those recommendations that have not yet been implemented and start there? And if those are going to be morale boosters, and we know that an improved climate in the school improves test scores, or there's a correlation there, why don't we just do that instead of wasting a whole nother year on a study committee it's ultimately going to come to the same conclusions as a commission that we've already funded?
Sure. Well, I leave it to the will of this committee to decide the right way to get to the shared result that we all have. I will say that probably some of the things need to be updated because it has been a few years since that committee developed those recommendations. And then there may be additional things like that digital learning component that we might want to bring to the table that have come to the forefront since the time that the ERC met.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we have others that wish to speak to this resolution?
Mr. Chairman, at the proper time, I move this resolution do pass.
This is not the proper time, but these are hearings only today, and we'll go back and put these together and come back and hear and for a vote at another time. No one else to speak to that resolution. All right, then second on our list today is House Resolution 1160. Representative Dwayne Hill.
Thank you, Chairman, Committee. I'd like to ask to you for a study on House Resolution 1160, which is Kratom. A year ago, I didn't know what Kratom was. But a few months ago, my coroner introduced me to what Kratom has done. And since then, let me give you a little bit of background on Kratom. And this is from the FDA Commissioner, Scott Gottlieb. The FDA has issued a public health advisory related to mounting concerns regarding risk associated with the use of Kratom. The FDA is concerned about harmful, unapproved products that have been crossing our borders and increasing in numbers. The agency has a public health obligation to act when we see people being harmed by unapproved products passed off as treatments and cures for serious conditions. Now, there is some in our society that thinks that Kratom may be of use to them in different ways. Over the past several years, a botanical substance known as Kratom has raised significant concerns given its increasing prevalence and potential safety risks. Today, the agency issued a public health advisory related to the FDA's mounting concerns regarding risk associated with the use of Kratom. And in talking with Assistant Deputy Director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, in 2016 there was 5 deaths that had Kratom in their system. In 2017, there's been 16 deaths that had Kratom related, had it in their system. And the reason Kratom is becoming a concern is because it takes a special type of blood test to detect Kratom in the system. Now we have concerns about opioids. And the Food and Drug Administration had just said that considered kratom to be in that category. My coroner had just texted me last week about another death that was in a county that was close to ours, in Chattooga County, that had a death relating to kratom. I talked with a senator from Whitfield County, and their coroner has the same concerns going on with them, and he has questioned me about where we were at on the study. I took this to Senator Mullis. Senator Mullis is also having a study committee going on, I think, into the Senate as well, and maybe we can combine that as a joint study. Kratom is a little bit unheard of. A lot of people haven't heard of kratom, just like myself. And I doubt very seriously, maybe a few of you may have heard of kratom. But kratom is a as I was saying, a botanical substance that's grown in Malaysia, Indonesia, and in Peru. And they can't use it there, but they can sell it to other countries where they can use it. And I thought that was interesting, that they couldn't use it in their own country where they grow it, but they will. It's against the law there, but they will sell it to other countries who will. Right now, it's being sold in the vape shops. It's been sold in the stop-and-go markets. You can buy it right next to the candy counter. And the kids can get their hands on it. It's a growing concern among parents. It's a growing concern of those whose children have passed from overdose and had kratom in their system. And there needs to be a study of kratom just to see where and what it can or cannot do, so that we don't have another epidemic. Again, like I say, it's not something that shows up in the bloodstream when they do a natural test for drugs. It has to be a special type, so that's the reason it's becoming the choice. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever, and maybe you have, had family members who have been affected by opioids. Well, my family's has. And we have a lot of concerns about the different things that's out there. It seems like when you stop one, you've got others that come behind it that's harder to detect. And so with this information, I hope you will grant us to be able to do a study to determine. You don't want to classify one as a Schedule 1, 2, or 3 unless it needs to be. And evidently there's some concern, or the Food and Drug Administration wouldn't have made that kind of comment, and I'm reading you straight from their comments.
Yeah, Representative Hill, you said a year ago you didn't know what it was.
Right.
A year ago was when we, the GBI and Drugs and Narcotics Agency in Georgia, had added this particular substance to the dangerous drug list as a Class 1 drug. It is an opioid derivative, but at that time there were not enough deaths, as I remember the way it was put. And there was an outpouring of public support for kratom because evidently it is widely used. So
Yes, sir.
just to give you a little background that you didn't have there. Number 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to echo what you were saying. I did a vape bill a couple years ago, and a friend of mine who had just gone through rehab told me there were a rehab full of people at Ridgeview sitting there because of, I thought it was pronounced kratom. But, and I talked about the fact that we needed to be looking at this. And so, you know, fast forward a couple years later, I didn't know there were deaths related to this kratom, but it is alarming that we are legally selling this over the counter and our kids are getting a hold of it. And in talking to people in the vape shops as I was doing my research, you know, they had all kinds of glowing things to say about how this is so much healthier than, you know, other things. And so I agree that we do need to be studying this issue and looking at, you know, how safe is it? Are people dying? Are people sitting in rehabs because they have tried kratom or however you say it?
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that would be a good area for us to study.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And number 2.
Thank you, Representative, for bringing this before us. I was just doing some research because I'm not familiar with kratom or kratom either, but I was looking at WebMD. It looks like the FDA and DEA have been doing some public comment. Do you know anything? Can you talk about what the federal government's doing currently? Whether there's been public comment period closure, if they've had any findings or recommendations?
I know they've asked for public comment. Now, I haven't seen any reports based upon what they have accumulated from those comments. I know when I did a little study, right now there's like 3 to 5 million people that are using this, and that's the ones who are saying they're using it. No telling how many are not saying it because they're using it for various activities, I should say, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, number 6.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. I'm curious, for those folks who have been found with kratom in their system, were there other drugs present as well, or was that one of those things where they're like, this is the only thing we found that looks out of the ordinary?
And that's a very good question. And yes, there was other drugs, but what they're starting to see is that there's more of kratom in their systems than the other opioids and things that I don't know about all drug addicts or anything like that, but I do know of some people that I've talked to, and you know, if they're taking 1, they're taking 2. If they're taking 2, they're taking 3. They'll take whatever they can get when they can get it.
Okay, thank you. Representative Phelan, do you have anyone who wants to speak to this bill?
No, the gentleman who was, he didn't show up, so.
All right, well, thank you. And of course, this is a hearing only, so if we have another hearing, then, or be a time then for him to maybe give us information that he has. Thank you very much for bringing this.
Thank you.
House Resolution 1258, Representative Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bring before you today House Resolution 1258. And just to give you a little bit of background, there's some businesses that have had some questions regarding their regulatory fees and occupational tax. And so it did prompt a bit of I guess, study, so to speak, into what was happening within our code section as it relates to occupational taxes, regulatory fees and taxes and things like that. We came up with some legislation that would try to make it a little more fair and equitable across the board, because what we did find is there are a great deal of inequities with respect to how those taxes are levied at the local level. But as an alternative, since the code section is quite confusing, and without getting too deep into it, we deferred to a study committee, and all parties, I think, are interested in trying to find a way to make this a little bit more discernible, make it equitable and fair, how it's applied to businesses at the local level. So House Resolution 1258 is actually speaks to that, and will give us the opportunity to open that code section up, maybe take a look at some things and discuss what the proper solution may be.
Okay, do we have any questions of Representative Blackman? I have one. Are there a number of professions that this is true, or is it singular? How and are they, who are they regulated by, I guess?
Well, there's a good bit of it jumps all over the map, Mr. Chairman, if you will. What you have is you have certain professions that are listed as subject to a regulatory fee, and then you have certain professions that are exempted from a regulatory fee. And then later in the code section, it says if you are exempted from a regulatory fee, you may be an occupational tax may be applied or may not be. And then it lists the 1 through 18 as the professions, although there are many more than 1 through 18, as those that can select their occupational tax rather than it being imposed at the local level. So they get to choose how they're taxed. And so it just begs a lot of questions as to who's in what. And just for instance, some that fall into that same category would be lawyers, doctors, therapists, landscape architects, engineers. They all get to elect their occupational tax. And then you would have a list of others perhaps that are even regulated by the Secretary of State's office and licensed through them that are not, even though later in that section there's a paragraph that would include those types of businesses. So again, I know I'm probably talking in circles, but it's a confusing code section, and I think it would benefit from some maybe some reworking. And it was done many years ago, and this is very similar to what was done before.
Okay, thank you.
The study
Number
is, excuse
14.
me. Mr. Representative, so currently what you're asserting is that the law now excludes certain professions from being able to address occupational taxes in the manner in which they see fit?
There are 18 different professions that are allowed to choose how they are taxed at the occupational tax level, and then the rest of the businesses are applied an occupational tax based on the local entity that they are taxed by. And there's really no rhyme or reason, and I could get into some of the different discussions as to why some are in and why some are out and so forth, but there's really nobody that can put their finger on it. So this would kind of analyze who needs to be in, who needs to be out, does there need to be a different structure in place?
Well, it doesn't appear as if that we should be picking winners and losers.
I would agree with you, sir.
Everybody should have the same opportunity to make the selection that they deem necessary based on their business decisions, rather than the state arbitrarily saying this is the route that you should go.
Excellent point, sir.
All right. Thank you, Representative Blackman.
Thank you,
And was anyone here that was to speak to that?
I would imagine you might have a couple that would like to speak to this, yes, sir.
Okay. Huh. All right. Thank you. You just give your name and tell us why'd you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name's Joel Wiggins with GMA. This came up probably fall last year. Mark Woodall came to me with the general contractors and wanted to kind of determine why general contractors weren't included in this list of 18 names that Representative Blackman mentioned. And first of all, I want to thank Representative Blackman and Mark for bringing this to us and letting us work through this together. You know, what it was is generally the 18 is what we call at local level the 400 Club. And as he mentioned, occupational taxes, there's 4 ways a local government can charge them. A flat fee, by number of employees, by gross receipts, or a combination of those 3 methods. Profitability ratio. So those methods are what the local government can choose to apply to all businesses. So the 18 professions, which were referred to as professional services, but as has mentioned, contain some from other professions that aren't doctors, lawyers, accountants, and so forth. So the discussion came up, what reason are these in one group and others not? So we asked for a study committee to look at exactly that question. This was brought up in 1992, and it went to study committee, and this is what came out of that. So we would like to look at that again, and I would like to give Mark a chance to speak.
Just a moment. I have a question, number 2.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, if I'm understanding this right, it's based upon location as far as how a business owner or occupational person under this category would be treated. Like if I were in City of Woodstock, I might be treated differently than I were in unincorporated Cherokee County.
That's correct. The city and the county could have different methods for applying occupational tax. That's correct.
All right, Mr. Woodall, you would like to add?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Mark Woodall with Associated General Contractors. We're the commercial builders statewide organization. Appreciate Joel's comments about coming to them when we had this issue dumped into our lap from one of our members. This particular member, just to tee up kind of the situation, is headquartered down in Houston County, but also has a satellite office up in Fulton County to allow them to service their projects in the north part of the state. The municipality in the south part of the state was charging based on number of employees. The municipality in the north part of the state was charging based on the flat $400 fee, but it decided to change for the upcoming year to a gross receipts tax. That person's tax went from $1,600 to over $20,000. And so we started diving into the law, and as Joel indicated, the law was changed, I think in 1992, 1993, so it's real tough to put it all back together. But the bottom line, as Representative Blackman indicated, the criteria for being able to be eligible to select your basis of tax is being a statewide, state licensed entity by the Secretary of State that does not allow local regulation of that profession. Well, in 2006, 2007, after 50 years of fighting it, we started licensing general contractors and home builders. So we qualify based on the criteria to select the tax, but we're not being granted that opportunity. So that's what brought us to the conversation. We do think folks need equitable treatment under the law. Representative Dukes, we don't think there should be winners and losers if the folks meet that criteria. So we're delighted to study this. We'd love to be at the table. GMA and ACCG have been very receptive to our concerns, our comments, but we do think it needs a look, and we need to have some balanced policy here for all, if in fact that's the criteria for consideration.
Yeah, I have a question number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Woodall and Joel. What I would suggest is that member of Association of General Contractors move out to a more rural community to put their business, employ people in a rural part of the state, and I promise you a $400 fee would be plenty.
We have a lot of rural members. Number 17. Excuse me. Number 17, we have another question.
Thank you, Representative Shaw. Thank you for bringing this. As a former city council member, I feel the gentleman's pain. So in the study, are you all going to look at each municipality and each county, or are you just looking at the 18 or what goes into that category?
Oh, yeah, you can speak to that. You can speak to that. I was going to say it.
I think that some of that remains to be seen. Representative Carter, I think possibly both, all of the above. And honestly, it did start from one source, but as you peel back the onion and you look at this code section, I've gotten a lot of emails from other businesses and other professions, and it seems to be pervasive kind of across the board. And I must say GMA and ACCG have been extremely amenable to talking about this and looking for some common ground and some solutions.
What? Excuse me. All right, go ahead.
When I was on our city council, one of the things I noticed is that they had the council, the city hadn't looked at their own fees and ordinances in forever. So I know that is part of. That's why I was asking if that will be looked at during your study, because you are going to have inconsistencies on some of these municipalities based on when they updated the code, and you guys see you got affected by Fulton County because somebody decided to amend them. So I hope you will.
Great question. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good point.
Okay, thank you. And we have one other speaker to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Bruce Widener. I represent the Conditioned Air Association of Georgia, which are heating and air conditioning contractors, electrical and plumbing contractors. Just to give you a little background about this whole issue, I can't believe it was 27 years ago. I was looking through the first readers, sitting in the House Clerk's office, and saw that there was what I came to learn was a $200 club back then, and saw that all these special privileges the $200 club had. And I thought, gosh, I need to add my contractors to that list of special people. So we did that. We asked a friendly legislator to do that, and you would have thought I wanted to take the dome off the Capitol because everybody came out of the woodwork wanted to be added to that then. But we saw that one thing that came out of that was that the bill did not pass that year, but we had a study committee passed, and as a result of that, our contractors who were having to buy a business license in every jurisdiction they did business in only have to buy one business license, just like the $200 club. And then we wanted to add ours to the $200 club, and we weren't able to do that year, but we've been talking about it ever since, and I'm glad that the home builders and general contractors are now licensed, and they wanted to be added to it also. So we're very much in favor of this resolution.
Okay, thank you. All right, next on our list for hearing is House Resolution 1321, Clay Cox. Is Representative Cox here? Okay. Then we have one other resolution, Representative Green, and House Resolution 1053.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Mine is simply an urging resolution, and it deals with the National Park Service. The state of Georgia has over 11 National Park Service units, 3 natural heritage areas, and 2 national trails that we keep that are in as part of the state of Georgia. And right now, there's $108 million in national service needs that are for the state of Georgia. And this is just urging Congress to look at this and to try to meet the needs with some resources in the state of Georgia. And I became interested in this when I met with some of the individuals at the national parks here in Georgia, and they were showing me some of the basic needs there. And that's all it does, is just an urging resolution there.
Okay, thank you, Representative Green. Anyone else to speak to this resolution? All right, since I did advertise this as hearing only, we'll also hear this one today, and it'll be back on the agenda for a vote at a later date.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, members of the committee.
That completes our agenda for today. Do I have a motion that we adjourn? So done.